just say something? When you said complexities, I was listening to, I don't think it was Vernon Wolf, somebody else who said, it's very complex. A lot of people say, well, there's just a simple solution. And he said, no, that's not true. There might be a complex solution that is simpler to use, but the solution is also complex.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that makes sense.
We are in a time of greater complexity as a function of the sheer availability of information. So we have to be able to discern and filter through what is meaningful, what is useful, what is going to support the creation of solutions to the challenges and problems that we are faced with. So it is a complex time, you know, and it is the old souls, it's those that are actually operating at that frequency level that are experiencing this complexity in different ways, because those who are lower down the frequency scale are not resonating in the same way. For them, life really, to a great extent, is still relatively simple, if that makes sense. So you find other people aren't experiencing the same compression as we perhaps are, and you may have observed this. So but as they are being catapulted through into the higher frequency bands, that begins to come on board for them as an internal and an external experience. So that's part and parcel of what I want to share with you in respect of this spiral dynamics model, because this helps us to perhaps understand how that process takes place, how it links in with soul ages, physical ages, and the various waves of evolution. So what I'm going to do this evening, this is really just scratching the surface of spiral dynamics. So I'm going to go through this, and then we're going to pick out two of the lenses and then pair up to do holodyne processes on those specific lenses of the spiral dynamics model. Does that make sense? So we start diving in more deeply in respect of understanding. So you guys are right with that? If you guys are all A for okay, we can get Mariah to start the recording. All right, Mariah.
We're ready.
Okay, cool. We're recording. So welcome to the Magnificent Souls. Is this number 5 or 6 at this stage of the game? I think it's number 5 that we tried to do that we're actually redoing at the moment. But as has been, just excuse me, sort of shuffling around. As has been mentioned previously, and as we chatted last week, there's a matrix of understanding and information that is developing that incorporates some of the essence of what we have been learning and takes us into a far greater, bigger picture, so that we can begin to understand A, how society is structured, B, how individuals perceive, not only how, but why various individuals perceive and respond and create the world that we see out there, and then how we might be able to language any interventions or interactions with them so that we can be of greater benefit to the whole, because that's an old soul's attribute. And also to understand perhaps more deeply and to heal aspects of our own old soul journeys through the clarity that's provided with different lenses that we can see ourselves, our domain, and our environment through. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. But the initial model that I actually want to introduce to you is something that I came across a couple of years ago, and I can see how this actually fits in and adds a beautiful dimension to the holodynamics work as we start really deepening the process. So you guys have got the script. At the end of this, we're going to do some work with the holodynes. Now, spiral dynamics is a model of and for the evolution of consciousness and societies in the world. So I just went to click on the second slide. Mariah, can you, sorry, can you click on this? That's it. Thank you. Spiral dynamics is a model that was based on the leading edge work of Dr. Clare Graves. Absolutely amazing. Now, what I'm going to do, you guys, by the way, I have actually printed a copy of these slides with note pages, but because it was also late, I'm going to send you the slides after the presentation, but it's a good idea for you to actually make notes anyway as we go through them. Based on the work of Dr. Clare Graves, and this actually came about, I think this model was originally introduced in around about the 1970s. So it's been around for a while, but it was absolutely leading edge understanding for its time. And what Clare Graves did was he was a psychologist. He actually went around the world and he wanted to understand what it was that made different cultures what they were, but also what was perhaps common between different cultures around the world and different what he termed value systems. Now, our value systems are based on our consciousness. As our consciousness evolves, our value systems change. Hence, the societies and cultures that are developed as a consequence of that, they change. But what he discovered was that there were common values that were exhibited across cultures, and this understanding was a way to be able to break down barriers and to understand individuals from a value-based perspective across different cultures. So there was a commonality that he started understanding, plus he observed that there was this streamlined flow and way in which human consciousness and these value systems actually developed. So it's the development, it's a model for the development or evolution of human consciousness. It is a continued spiral of development, and we'll be very familiar, you guys will be very familiar with the whole model of the spiral. A spiral of development to more elaborate, complex, and inclusive levels as you work up the spiral. And you can see that if we use that as a model and we start at the bottom, that the consciousness at this particular level is very limited, very confined, very restricted. It's limited to narrow perspectives on the world. As you move up the spiral through different stages of development, from soul as well as physically in life, your whole worldview expands. So from beige down here at the bottom all the way up to turquoise, each color, each turn of the spiral represents a different set of values, a different stage of consciousness development, and a different lens through which the individuals would perceive the world. And you'll start to recognize this. The thing is, we don't evolve through these levels and leave the previous one behind. We evolve through these levels of consciousness, but we hold onto and we retain the imprints and the learnings from the previous level. Because if you had to lose any one of these, the whole spiral would collapse.
I have a question.
Yes.
Julie, is this representative of one lifetime or a series of lifetimes?
All. It's an inclusive model that includes various lifetimes in it. So there are soul ages that you can actually see within this model. I'm going to make it a little bit clearer when we go through the sort of understanding what each level brings. And it is also representative of development in any individual lifetime. It's just that those who have spent many lifetimes and been through lots of experiences on this spiral, so their consciousness has evolved, when they come into this life, they move up that spiral much more quickly. Are you with me?
Yes.
So younger souls who've never really completed moving up to the top of the spiral may quite easily get get stuck in one of the lower levels, so they haven't fully developed the awareness through the entire spiral. Yeah. So the model itself helps to understand how and why people see, interact, and create the world that they experience, and that we also see out there, because we see many different types of worlds or environments or realities being created and constantly recreated on an ongoing basis. And from an old soul perspective, from where we sit, which tends to be old soul is like the territory up here at the top of the spiral, you're kind of going, why do they keep on doing that? You know, can't they actually see that there's another option? And that's what we're here for. And the reality is that when they are only evolved to a certain level of the spiral, a certain level of consciousness, they cannot see that. They cannot see beyond where they are. So each level of the spiral is a construct, or each level of consciousness is a construct of memes, value systems, and perceptual filters. All levels are necessary for development of a fully functioning society. So, i.e., in other words, a complete spiral is actually necessary for the development of and advancement of civilizations and society. There are effectively 2 tiers to the spiral. I'm really scratching the surface because this is going to go and can go much more in depth. There are 2 tiers in this. You find one tier which operates from beige up to the end of green. Okay. The next tier, so that's usually referred to as tier 1. And that tends to be the domain of younger souls and younger soul ages. Tier 2 starts in yellow. And it's yellow and turquoise, and what actually begins to evolve beyond the yellow, beyond the turquoise. And something happens in the brain, and this also brings into why I was working with the brain balancing as part and parcel of the Old Souls program, because something happens in the brain when there is this step change into what is known as tier 2, because tier 2 represents more integrative, process-based thinking that incorporates both hemispheres of the brain and the ability to see things as a seamless system rather than in pockets or silos, which up until that point is how most people envisage the world. So what we do with the brain balancing, Laurie, I see you, yeah. What we do with the brain balancing is we support the second tier brain development so that we can fuel this process-based big picture thinking that uses both hemispheres of the brain. So I just wanted to get to that. Yeah, so Laurie?
Well, I mentioned that I was working on one of the last things that I can sense right now on the holodynes, and that was exactly what it was, is my recent inability to have patience or allowance or acceptance for others who just don't get it.
Yeah.
And
okay.
I've become so reactive in the last few months. Just people just don't see. I mean, for some reason, I mean, obviously for this reason, but I can easily just see things instantly.
Yes.
And see beyond, you know, what's going to unfold in an instant. And it just seems that so many others are still focusing on this piece right here.
Yes.
And I'm just
okay.
very reactive.
What is interesting, and that's a really great place to be, because once we can see that, and once we understand that they literally cannot see what we can see. They cannot see what you can see no matter how many times you tell them. If you can present it to them in a different way, which is within their framework, within the construct of the memes and their perception, then they will begin to move. But it is a slower process for them. But that is the gift that you guys, as old souls and integrative thinkers, actually have. And it's once we get beyond our own frustration, because the frustration is more not the frustration is really, how can I make them see what I can see? How can I get them to see what they can see? Once we get to the point where we go, well, they can't see what I can see, and that's not going to happen. So how can I actually support them where they are at this moment? And that is the important thing, because from a second tier perspective, you can see what is needed. And it's bringing it down. I don't like that phrase because it infers that the lower levels are less valuable or important. It's not really about that. It's bringing it into a language and perspective that is meaningful and supportive for them. And this is hopefully what's going to assist you with that. So thank you for that. That's really important. I used to be exactly the same. It's like just absolute frustration. Why? Like, what is it? What is it about me that I can't communicate this in such a way that they can see it? They're not going to. Okay. So there is a spiral correlation with both physical ages and soul ages. And that's also really important to understand. So an old soul trying to communicate with a young soul is a challenge, and can be a challenge, but they look to the wisdom and the guidance of the old souls in certain aspects. Okay. So that's the model. And the colors that were attributed to the respective levels of the spiral are also hugely significant. And I find this amazing and really fascinating. Having done color therapy, there is a relationship between the levels of the spiral, the attributes of the colors, and the qualities within those particular levels. So it is really, really interesting in respect of how that was almost a divinely attributed quality through the color that was given to these, without, for the people who did this, without there being conscious awareness of the meanings of the colors. That's really quite fascinating. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And what is important for us to understand is that people are on different steps of the evolutionary ladder. Most people are centered in red, blue, and orange value systems, and you can see that those are further down the spiral, and those are the individuals, because if most people are there, those are the ones that you're going to find you have the greatest levels of interaction with. Okay. This is part of reality. It doesn't mean that one person is better than another. It's about giving the person what they need based on where they are on the ladder and based on their life conditions. And that is where our gifts come in. So rather than it being, I want to communicate what it is that I know, is if we can communicate that based on what they need for where they are at. You guys all right with that? Yeah, you see it? Right, next slide. So let's have a look at how the various levels of the spiral are characterized, if you like. So if you have a look on this slide, you'll see that down at the bottom, the beige level of the spiral, which is right down at the bottom, it's the little tip. And this particular slide, the colors are not that brilliant, but you can see this is like the bottom of the spiral. This is what you might call the lone survivalist. These are individuals who the world is a big, bad, scary place. Their value systems are all orientated around my individual survival. And if my survival means that you have to die or I have to take over that patch, then so be it. And that is the beige survivalist system. It's survival of the individual at all costs. within a big scary world. Now, we do not have huge numbers of individuals in the world at that level at the moment. We do have some, and we do have some countries, um, certainly some of the African countries where this is the case, because there tends to be a lot more violence around the beige survivalist pattern. It's either me or you kind of thing. It's an either or, and it's an individually based value system, and an individual filter. Now, what you will see as you actually move and progress up the spiral is that you move from systems that are individually based, that strengthen the individual's perception of themselves or expand the individual's perception of themselves. And that is alternated by then taking that self-perception into a group relationship. So you alternate all the while. So you move from beige, which is lone, into the purple, the next level of the spiral, which is a group relationship which deals with traditions and hence is known as the traditionalist. From that, you actually then move into what is known as the lone leaders, and these are individuals who emerge from the tight-knit values of these small grouping systems. So there you have a new level of individuality which steps out of the closed-knit circle. And with that leadership that is actually developed with the energy that goes along with this individual power role that is now being expressed in society, this could actually lead to absolute anarchy if everybody was a lone leader and expressing their individual power. So what happens from a societal and a group perspective is then you start getting the need for greater communities of people beyond the very enclosed traditionalist small groupings, sort of family groupings, tribal groupings. You could say the traditionalist group is a tribal group value system. The loyalists, or the truth seekers, as a blue group value system, expands into the application of rules and laws for living in greater community with each other. So it's like the gathering of the clans into larger communities. Okay, so you got that? Within those larger communities, you have all of these laws and regulations. So the value system that is expressed to a large degree, accepted and imposed within society, within these larger group communities, tends to frustrate those individuals who are then being treated the same as everybody else. So it's quite a uniform application of the values of that society. And you then get those individuals who are evolving, expressing a need again for individual breakout from that uniformity. So from that, you see the next development of individuality, which is what we call the achievers. And it's those that strive for status, recognition, and success within that society. And that value system is also really, really important from the perspective of it is these individuals and this expression of individuality that is responsible for a lot of the creativity. You can see that's actually colored in orange, which is interesting. And orange is about creativity. They fuel innovation. They fuel scientific exploration. They fuel advancements and within society. So they help to expand society and make people's lives easier to a large extent. All of these attributes, when they are positively applied within the expression of them, because every single one of these has its shadow. And that's where we as individuals in our development get to go with the holodyne process is into the shadow aspects of all of these. You guys with me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you've got the orange layer now of the achievers, and it's like go 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 go. This is now a typical person in this mode would be think of Tom Cruise or top level salespeople who are just, got to reach the top, more, you know, and the flashy cars and the status symbols and, you know, sort of those are innovating and all of the technological advancements that we actually see. A lot of that is coming from individuals who have been driven by this particular value system. And it's important for expansion and for personal growth because we get to experience the extensiveness of our capabilities. So it's another expression of the power of the red. It lifts that power of the red into another level. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So from that, you can imagine now you've got a whole society of achievers and everybody's wanting more. Something's got to change. Something's got to change. Now, what often happens at this level is this more leads to burnout because you can't keep going because nature doesn't work that way. Nature's going to say, okay, what about your relationships? What about the environment? What about caring for this entire environment within which we live? And we're talking personal environment, ecological environment, family environment. What about all of the rest of it? Because the orange level, this striving often ignores everything else. So it's to the detriment of the environment. So burnout comes and suddenly these individuals wake up one day and they go, there's got to be something more than this. There's got to be something more. I've missed something. Here it is. I've got all the status symbols. I've got absolutely everything I need. What's wrong with my life? There's still a hole inside that hasn't been filled. So this leads to the evolution of the next level of consciousness, which is now the green. And these individuals now become more involved. They seek harmony between all of the different aspects of the system. And this is the beginning of really great change, that there is a concern about people. There is a need for harmony in relationships. So very, very much relationship orientated at all levels within the system. Okay, so you can kind of see that evolution from the individual focus back to another group focus, but in a bigger way. So instead of it being community, as in the blue and the structure of community with all of their laws, we're now looking at the green level, which is community in relation to and in relationship with the natural world. So it's a bigger sense and aspects of community. So you can see how this becomes bigger as we move up the spiral. You guys still with me? Mm-hmm. Yep. So what we then have, you know, some of the attributes of this, sort of where it begins to be expressed possibly a little bit more in a more challenging way. It's really good because we kind of think, well, the greenies, it's all really wonderful, and harmony of the environment, it's absolutely powerful. We need that in societies to be able to be cognizant of the greater relationships of the whole. So it has a more holistic approach to an extent. However, for somebody who is in that green belt, in that green band, it becomes relationship is the only thing that matters. It's the only thing of importance. So they completely dismiss all technological advancement. It's complete dismissal of everything else that is actually important and contributes towards the functioning, the greater functioning of society as a whole. They can also be very, very patronizing. So in a challenging way, it's kind of like, I know what's best for you. Okay. So we go through and we have all of these attributes as part of our own personal spiral. Right? So from that sort of patronizing effect, the greens, to a large extent, they can see way more than others can at other levels in the spiral, but they're still not able to integrate, for instance, technology and advancement with the relationship aspect, because the entire focus is on relationships. Hence, we now get this step approach into the yellow, which is where the individual now expands out of that to be able to see more of the big picture and begins to integrate and see how one system fits in with another, fits in with another, fits in with another. Okay. And yellow is really very interesting because they can see this. However, yellow, because it's also an individual lens on which the world is viewed, yellow becomes a lot more tolerant of the other levels because it can see all the way down the spiral. It can see how everything fits in together. So there's often a great level of tolerance that's actually developed in this level of development, personal development. However, what yellow can do is get so frustrated that it actually turns its back on everything and goes, well, you just get on with what you're doing and I'll get on with my thing. I'll do my thing, you do yours. It's fine. It's not a problem. However, it's the wisdom of yellow that is actually needed to be brought into play to support the entire evolution through the totality of the spiral. Yeah. So when yellow lets things go to excess, you do your thing, I'll do mine. It's kind of like the fabric begins to break down, and there is a need for bringing that yellow expansive thinking. Yellow often also sees beyond just the earthly realm into, it begins to get a hint of the energetics that underlie the movement and the processing of the systems. Okay? So you begin to get a sense of the energetics. So from that evolves what is known as the turquoise, which is the highest level currently evolved on the planet. And there are not that many pure turquoise individuals or turquoise thinkers or turquoise, those who are embodying the turquoise consciousness on the planet at the moment. However, hence, there's not a huge number of old souls on the planet. But the turquoise are the globalists. So they begin to connect from a truly holistic approach, the ether, the unseen energetic realms together with the physical realms. It is a futuristic, very, very expansive perception which takes us beyond the boundaries of the planet. So it really looks at the planet as a whole. And one of the tenets of the turquoise way of thinking is it's very eccentric. So people do not understand turquoise thinking. Okay. They cannot understand it. It's eccentric. It is just so way beyond most people's ability to perceive, which is why it becomes really difficult for individuals further down the spiral. It incorporates space and the ether. So it's a really vast understanding of healing, holism, but they also are able to sacrifice certain things to be able to chop off what is no longer needed and to sacrifice for the greater good of the whole, for the development and the evolution of the system. So they can see where things need to be pruned. Yeah, Rachel.
Is that, from what I'm understanding there, from what you're saying, is that when you start to embody the other aspects of yourself, you know, the galactic side and the other
Yeah.
parts
Yeah.
of you.
Yeah. 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 And that's, yeah, it's the embodiment. So for instance, you might find somebody who is strongly focused in green that has a hint of turquoise. So if they've got a hint of that starting to emerge, that's where we would find individuals in the environment, for instance, who are very, very focused on healing, very focused on, you know, sort of the energy work and so on and so forth, and focused on the identification with their galactic self, but not able to integrate it through their being, because we have to go through the yellow stage of integrating and that brain development in order to be able to integrate those higher concepts effectively and successfully. So it's like we can't miss a stage. So very often when people go through the awakening process, they might awaken from perhaps orange, or they might awaken from perhaps green, and then awaken to something within turquoise. But they have to be able to come back and develop those other layers to fully integrate what it is that they have woken up to. And that's often what seems the dark night of the soul, because it's not only that you come back to the green level to be able to integrate it, you feel as if you've taken 2 steps forward and another step back, but you also then need to go all the way down the spiral and have a look at where in any of the other layers we have been fragmented in our consciousness, where any particular needs at other levels of the spiral have not been met, so that we can embrace and be the wholeness of the spiral that we can then manifest and support in society. So do you see how huge this is?
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys get a hint of this?
It's big.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and it's big that we're doing it, because I think as a group, as we're doing it, we're creating a huge wave that's moving out.
Yeah. Yeah. So the holodyne work, when we do this, it gives us, as I said to you, it gives us the focus into each of these lenses. So we're going to go into each level of the spiral and understand how that level has contributed towards our own life and all of those lifetimes, and work with the holodyne script in that level of the spiral so that we build and strengthen and mend our own spiral. And as we do that, it will assist us in providing a framework for supporting others. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You with me? Yeah. So just to stay on this slide for a moment. Oh, I've got the soul ages on the next slide, I think.
You want the next slide?
Yeah, because I was going to. There we go. Thank you. Overlaying the soul ages on this. Okay, so what you see is, to understand then what I said earlier, old soul territory is really here at the globalistic synergy level, up at the turquoise level. And just by the way, if you look on the drawing that's on the slide on the colors of the spiral, you'll see another color above the turquoise. It actually looks blue, but if you count up the levels, you've got beige, purple, red, orange, green, yellow, turquoise. The color that's emerging at the top of that spiral is coral. And that is still an emergent aspect, and I'll take you through that in a moment, because that is not yet developed within society, but there are hints of it beginning to emerge. So you guys may experience it. Okay, so the top where we're at the moment is in the turquoise. That is old soul territory. Coming down within the yellow. Yellow is mature souls, generally merging into and maturing into old souls. So you can get some old souls within the yellow territory, because old souls have the ability to see the whole picture. Okay, a greater ability. But old souls are also very good at kind of like the live and let live. Okay, and just let you get on with it kind of thing, which is very much a yellow aspect. And the maturity of old souls is to move into the turquoise to be able to see how everything can be pulled together for the benefit of all. You come down to, now if we're talking mature souls sit squarely within the green level of the spiral. The focus in the green, as mentioned earlier, is actually on relationships. So the mature souls tend to be very caught up with relationship dynamics. They have very emotionally driven lives. So there's lots and lots of emotional ups and downs as a consequence of all of their relationships. So somebody who is still caught up in all of the emotionality and the ups and downs of all of that is very likely more at the mature soul level as opposed to old soul level. Everybody likes to think that they're an old soul. You know, it's just kind of understanding the various attributes. So strong relationship dynamics with mature souls. So most of those would actually be in the green. Young souls, yes, Rachel?
I was just wondering, for people who are in the mature souls,
Yeah.
is that somebody who has not yet identified that they're an old soul, or is it somebody who will become an old soul within this lifetime, or is that because they've come in as a mature soul? Do you know what I mean?
It's likely that they could come in as a mature soul, but that doesn't preclude the fact that the evolutionary waves that are impulsing us at the moment could catalyze their evolutionary process within this lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I recognize people in what you just said.
Yeah. So it doesn't mean that they could not, or they're not in that stage of development where they are finding or opening up to those old soul attributes within this lifetime. It could very well happen because the frequency, especially the ninth wave stuff, the frequency of the ninth wave is really fueling those advancements. So the orange layer of the spiral tends to be filled with young souls. Now, it may also help, the one thing I don't have is an extended description in this particular presentation, and it may help you if I give you a description of each of the different soul groups. You know, we've been working so far with understanding ourselves, perhaps as old souls and what it is that characterizes those, but if we can perhaps understand some of the other profiles, it also gives us a different foundation and platform. So if that would be useful for you guys, then I'll pull that out for you. So young souls, perfect in the orange, because young souls are all about win-lose. It's all about me. It's about status. It is about opposites. It's kind of like it's another version of it's either me or you. You know, and it's all out to win. It's like in it to win it is the attitude of young souls, which is exactly the attribute of the orange. So it's whether or not that is used, those qualities are actually used to support personal development, or whether those attributes are actually used to their own detriment, to the detriment of society and the ecology and the environment. The blue, which tends to be the platform and the rules and regulations of society itself, that's things like your law system, your school system, your judicial system, your church, your formal religions, all fall within the blue. It's clear demarcations between right and wrong. Whereas those lines get a little bit more blurred the further up the spiral you go. Within the blue, you have individuals who are very clear about this is right and that is wrong. And this is where you kind of find the protecting our territory against terrorists kind of attitude comes in. So this is ours, patriotism and nationalism. They all fall within this blue framework here. And they tend to be baby souls. So at a young soul level, and they need that structure in order to be able to develop. And you find the emergence of young souls within that structure. Okay? Because
That's
that
really-
also
sorry.
fuels
Go on.
that fuels the evolution into the orange level of the spiral. So it's the young souls that stir things up in there. Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's interesting then how, I mean, from my perspective, how I can see, you know, I can identify people, especially within
Yeah.
my family,
Yeah.
you know, and then how much that has clashed and stretched me and made me sort of try and step out of it, but also then to understand it. So I can see, you know, moving up how the people that you know, the baby soul, if you like,
Yeah.
has helped me to move myself up into that understanding of them, rather than, you know,
Yes. Yeah. And they are all valid.
yeah,
Because we wouldn't be old souls if we hadn't gone through this process.
no,
So lifetime after lifetime, we have been through this evolutionary process. Nobody will come in as a baby soul and evolve to an old soul in one lifetime. That's just, it's not possible. And they can only really evolve in a powerful, in a powerful way that is in accordance with the hierarchy, if you like, the evolvement, the opening up of evolution, when they are supported within their environment.
yeah,
Okay, so if they are not supported, they're likely going to go off track, and it's going to take them longer to go through their evolutionary process, their evolutionary journey. So what can we do as old souls to actually hold that spiral, so that everybody can learn in the most beneficial way, evolve in the smoothest, easiest way for them, that supports the totality of the evolution of the spiral, the totality of evolutionary development. So when we actually look at, you know, in certain new age circles, for want of a better description, there is a school of thought that says everybody's going to ascend. Everybody's going to ascend, and everybody is going to think the same way that we do. No.
That'll never happen.
That'll never happen. No.
Mm.
Who was that? Bonnie, you've disappeared. Are you having lunch?
Yes, but no, that'll never happen was my exact thought.
Yes. And maybe, you know, sort of looking at this and kind of understanding the progression and the evolution, it becomes easier to contemplate that new age precept, because not everybody will perhaps ascend to another frequency level, but it does not mean that people are going to jump from that purple level up to the turquoise level of the spiral altogether one shot. Something would have to give, because you cannot get from the bottom to the top without going through each of the stages in between. Otherwise the spiral breaks down. Okay. Because of the learnings that are integrated at each level. So you kind of see, so you get baby souls at the individual power level. So baby souls, they can wreak havoc in the world. So baby souls they're also in it for power, you know. It's kind of like, from an age perspective, it's like the terrible twos. So it's those little kids now going through and beginning to recognize that they're an individual, and they're starting to test their boundaries and starting to understand and recognize that, you know, hey, I do have a power. How far can I push it?
Mhm.
And that's really what baby souls do on the world stage. So you can kind of see that with some of the African countries, with some of the African dictators. They're baby souls, you know, and until we get a maturity of soul age in those leadership positions so that society can then be structured in such a way that it is supported at every level of the spiral, that supports every um, group or individual's needs within that framework, we're going to have these conflicts, we're going to have corruption. You know, that individual power thing is all about power over other people, power over others
Mhm.
as much as possible. That's the difference between the red and the orange. So the red is about, you know, power as much as possible over others in its negative expression, whereas orange, yeah, there is an extent to that, but it's about winning, it's about achieving. Whereas red is like that raw red primal power.
All right, so I have a question. I want to start a political discussion, but just curious about, does Trump fall in orange or red?
Where would, okay. You see, this is where it gets really interesting and some of the discussions come in. Where would you guys put him?
Well, I had the exact same question as Bonnie. I would be surprised that he would be so low, but he displays his baby, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say he's probably baby into young.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, there's probably a transition, but yeah, that's a really young soul, because if you take America as a country, where would you if you take a look at America, where would you put America?
Moving from blue into orange.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So you can see the devastation that's actually been wreaked by all of the technology that is being misused, and people are just disregarded completely with so much of the technology being implemented. GMO seeds, GMO foods, you know, all of the rest of it. The environment is just absolutely negated. Corporations have the run of the show. Absolutely blue into orange. And within that, there are pockets. There are pockets of green, there are pockets of yellow, there are pockets of turquoise. So you do find that within various countries. So it tends to be a young soul country. Now, in respect of leadership, with leadership, it is very difficult to put a leader in a position of power if they are too far removed from the base culture of the country. So Barack Obama, I would probably put more young, mature in respect of his profile. But it would have been difficult. I think he found it difficult because there was still a huge need for a restructuring of society at the blue level, while keeping the orange individuals happy. But there was not enough of a relationship at the societal structural level. So there was a disrespect for him because he was viewed as being too soft. And sometimes that's what happens with the blues and the greens. That's kind of, you know, you're a bit fluffy, you know, green is seen as a bit fluffy. I don't know, that's just a comment. What do you guys think? You guys lived in the country. Does that make sense? Unless you get somebody in there who is at the yellow turquoise level, balanced brain, big picture perspective, who can see down the spiral, who can then initiate structures within the culture to satisfy all of those needs, you're going to have problems. And that is why the pockets of yellow, the pockets of green, the pockets of turquoise are struggling so much with what they see happening in the platform of the culture in America, for instance. And the UK is just the same. You know, I mean, the UK, I would also put strongly blue. Absolutely. Down to developing the technology within the orange and using it to survey and monitor all of their citizens. So it's like, these are the rules. The computer says no. That was an expression that derived in the UK. Computer says no. Strongly blue, and orange. Some green. There's quite a green movement here. Pockets of that, but very, very small pockets of yellow and turquoise. Very small.
Again, just out of curiosity, where is Obama? I see him up higher. Is that why he wasn't successful?
Yeah, that's why I would say, yeah, I connecting with his energy, I would actually put Obama at the mature,
Yes.
as a mature soul.
Yeah.
More into relationships
Yep.
and that harmony. So you would often say the right things, but didn't often get to do them.
Right.
And that's very much a green aspect within the spiral. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
Mhm.
It is.
Very interesting. So you start looking at the way that organizations are structured, with the family dynamics, with the dynamics and people that you meet in your everyday life, and you can start to see some of this actually playing out, but also how important the role is for those at the top of the spiral, because they're the only ones that can see all the way down. Because if you're in green, the only thing you can see is green. Okay, green is the only thing that's important. If you're in orange and that's your lens, the only thing that you can see that's important is orange. So it's technology and growth and achievement and sales targets and goals, and it's the only thing you can see. If you're in blue, that's the only thing. You need a structured society. And I'm a rebel and a maverick kind of thing, and I kind of go, no, you don't. When people become responsible for themselves, you don't need all of this nonsense. Well, actually, we do for a lot of people. So it was really interesting for me to sort of wind the maverick neck in and the liberator in, and begin to understand how some of those structures serve great swathes of the population, but then they've become autocratic. Yeah, so you can kind of see how it actually all flows. There was something I was going to say to you. One of the things that was really interesting for me, and I think that's why I learned about spiral dynamics initially, like 20 years ago, I came across it. And that was because spiral dynamics had been used in South Africa. We had spiral wizards who came in from overseas when Nelson Mandela took over leadership. And he and this team developed the South African Constitution on the basis of spiral dynamics principles. And that's one of the reasons why South Africa is probably the only country in the world that has 11 official languages, because it recognized all of the different tribal groups and the different language groups within the country. There was a lot of recognition at multiple levels. So the Constitution was a very powerful thing that was embraced eventually by many people. What has happened since is that because the leadership, Nelson Mandela was probably sitting up at the yellow, mature, old soul level. So he was able to hold it all together, and he was looking for harmony, and he was looking for peace, and able to see beyond his own, sort of personal experiences. But once he was taken out of leadership, whoever was put into leadership within the ruling political party came in at a much lower soul level, and the Constitution has been negated. The levels of corruption have gone through the roof. The country has actually devolved. So that can happen. And that can happen also within our own lives, is that we can actually progress up to the higher levels on the spiral. However, if we've got one aspect within that was underdeveloped during our own lifetime or lifetimes of development, that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, it can absolutely collapse the spiral and drag us back down. So just because we've got to that old soul level and we have the perspective, it doesn't mean that that is our rightful place and we will stay there, because we've got lifetimes of integration that are now happening and taking place. Yeah?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Can I just ask something, Julie?
Yes.
Something you were just saying there, that it's quite interesting if you think, like, from, you know, the UK's perspective, if you look at it, it's like a very sort of ancient lands, you know, where we live, and there's so much deep history, but then it's almost as though, because we've got that such a strong sort of tradition around the royal family,
Yeah.
you know, it's almost as though the land is being held back, if that makes sense.
Yep.
It's being
Absolutely.
held to ransom almost, you know.
Yes.
And I just wondered, is that possibly the reason why there's so much immigration coming in, is that there needs to be a flow of different types of people, those that aren't necessarily confined and just used to that program. Do you know what I mean?
Quite possibly, it's sort of breaking down some of those firewalls and traditionalist perspectives. And I think what is really important is to be able to hold on to the traditions that are of value, like family traditions. But do we need a monarchy to rule over us?
No.
You know, because that's really what the monarchy was put in for. And monarchy, you can see, comes right in at the purple level, right at the bottom of the spiral, because that's a traditionalist perspective. It's got nothing to do with upholding society. It's got to do with, you know, sort of leadership positions within a traditionalist group, as well as individual power and overruling.
Because I think monarchy, many, many years ago, there's always been that tradition, if you like, that they were above. But I think going further back, the person who was the leader was like the chieftain, the person that protected the family. You know, it was a bigger family rather than it being, you know, you're ruling over the whole country. You had clan leaders, and they all sort of came together to make, you know, I suppose, like you know, like a parliament almost.
Yes, you're right. And the key is to preserve the wisdom through those traditional groups, because part of the value system and things that are valued at that level is the oral tradition, the passing down, the passing on of wisdom, you know, sort of honoring the lineages, honoring the ancestors, the ability to tap into a level of consciousness that has been upheld and maintained so that we can access what is true and good and valuable to hold the foundation of life. Yeah?
Yeah.
So you guys are right with that? Oh, Laurie, okay. Sorry, we're going to miss you. Okay, so next slide, let's have a look. There's much, much more, and that's what I was saying. This is really scratching the surface, just so that you get the brushstroke picture, and over subsequent sessions, we're going to go much deeper. So there are two emerging spiral levels that we see very, very seldom at the moment. The first one is coral. And coral is another expression of red. So we see this evolution. So you've got red, orange, yellow, you know, as the three expressions of those individual values. Beyond turquoise, we actually see the emergence of coral. And it's kind of like coral as a color connects us with the attributes of compassion, of being of service. So we really take that individual connection to the global collective into our hearts. It's really a heart-centered, heart-based, very much a heart-based value system that's emerging. It's the new collective energy core, the sea of consciousness. It's the I as an individual but within the greater whole. And it's how can I be of service to the whole? That's the overall essence of the emerging coral. And then teal, which takes the turquoise globalist perspective to a whole new level, is about fusion of spirit and matter, which is really what we're starting to work with now. And I think one of the reasons why I so really enjoyed working with Spiral Dynamics in the very beginning 20 years ago was because I could see the potential for what it was actually bringing, the depth of understanding. Plus, one of my archetypal guides or whatever essences is the futurist. So the futurist is always like out there ahead of the curve going, it's really, really important that this becomes part of the embodiment. And I'm actually reminded of the discussion I had with Lorraine Gailey the other day, because it really was about this whole process of embodiment, which is it's like a second level emergence of on this spiral of consciousness, which is the actual fusion of spirit and matter. So that's really where the diamond consciousness takes us. And working with the diamond ultimately takes us is to that level. So these levels, coral and teal specifically, they are both old and transcendental soul aspects. So once you actually master the old soul level, you become more of a transcendental soul. And this is the terrain and the territory of the ninth wave. Okay. Ninth wave also touches in with yellow and turquoise. So from yellow and turquoise onwards, you have a lot of ninth wave influence. So but it's those that are really have made that leap from tier 1 to tier 2 in respect of the brain are those that are going to be able to harness and resonate with the ninth wave much more effectively. You get it?
All right, so a question with
Yes.
balancing. So
Yes.
my husband and I have both been doing it.
Yeah.
I don't know why he's hanging in there with it. And all of a sudden I'm noticing it's almost like he's back again to some of the old stuff, more of the judgments and things. Would that come up from the past?
Yes, sometimes it does. It does, because before all of the new neural nets sort of become strong enough to become embedded in the brain, because remember, as you're actually doing those symbols, you're growing neurons to restore your brain to its original whole-brained pattern. You're building connections across the corpus callosum and all of the rest of it. You've still got gaps in that before everything is fused in its new configuration. So what actually happens is some of the old networks actually do come up so that we can engage in a different thought pattern that is more in alignment with the new network that is being laid down. But until that is, does that make sense?
Well, yes, because
But yes, it can happen.
there was a conversation yesterday, and so we were talking about it today in the car, and I just said, that he was judging someone else, and it was very disdainful. And I said, it doesn't hurt the other person, but it's hurting you. And just all of a sudden in that second, he said, I understand that.
Yeah. So yes, it's like you can self-correct a lot more quickly.
Yeah.
But they will still come up as our brain keeps on growing and keeps on developing. And that's why the brain balancing program is a long-term activity, a long-term initiative, and it's of long-term benefit. But it enables much quicker self-correction. It also feeds into the ninth wave and the evolutionary developmental process in a really beautiful way.
But I think I can say that to him. So I thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions at the moment?
Yeah, Julie, where do you see the new light code, the structure light code coming into this?
Well, all of the light codes The structure light code that was used is just the updated version of the previous light codes. So there's an actual set of 40 of them, which have just been upgraded. So the light codes to me are an aspect of connecting with conceptual language, which takes us, it's basically through turquoise and beyond.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's galactic, it's cosmic, it's the language of the universe. It's also the language of our unconscious. So if we're talking about coral here, the collective energy, the sea of consciousness, it's actually a language that's associated with the deeper collective unconscious as well. Because geometry, light language, it's all the embodiment of concepts as opposed to direct meaning attributed to spoken language and words. So,
well, I guess the next part of the question then is, how does that relate to brain balancing and imaging and visualization of those?
well, the light codes would actually support the embedding of the new neural networks.
Okay.
Okay. They support the infusion and the absorption by light. If you focus on the light codes visually, the same way as you do with the brain balancing symbols, you're actually absorbing that information as a form of light, and it's being transmitted through your brain into your nervous system and the rest of your body. So it is a way of being able to connect with, translate, and understand the language of light as a concept rather than as... Does that make sense? It's kind of like, did you watch that movie, The Arrival? Sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
It was out a year or two ago. And all of the language in that, they had a linguistics expert who was actually brought in to communicate with it, you know, sort of these aliens that had actually landed, but their whole communication was through symbols. And what she realized was that each of those symbols embodied a concept rather than one word meaning.
Mm.
Okay, so it's more than and bigger than our spoken language. It's sort of almost beyond our current capacity to understand. But as we develop the neural networks and develop the pathways, we will come to actually understand what is being delivered through the light forms and the ninth wave in our current reality.
Mm.
Makes sense?
So the visualization between both of those,
Yeah.
the brain balancing
Yes.
and the light codes and the diamond,
Yes.
integrate all of those things and
Yes.
solidify them.
Yes. Yes. And they support the embodiment, the actual fusion of spirit and matter.
Mhm.
So the diamond and everything that it represents, almost it covers all of the attributes of the spiral and carries us through into the higher evolutionary levels of what it is, because there's a lot of science also that feeds into the understanding of the diamond. There is the strength of the diamond, which it represents our individual power body, our light body. So there are many, many attributes. And the beauty of it is that the spiral actually, or the diamond, facilitates spiralized movements of energy. It's like the diamond supports the development of the spiral in multiple ways.
Mhm.
Yeah. And our evolution. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Next slide. How long have you got, Laurie?
Just a couple of minutes.
Okay.
So
Right.
sorry.
No, that's okay. So what actually happens, and we might look at doing this a little bit further down the line. We've got examples of spiral profiles. So we all have all of the values. We all have all of those lenses that we can interchange and put on and take off. It's just that our focus is more strongly orientated. We have a greater ease of seeing through certain lenses than others. Okay, so when we do a spiral profile, you can actually see, having a look at this slide, that you get a really, really good indication of where an individual is at by examining his value systems. So if you've got, now this is a couple, and this is a couple, so you've got George and Selma. You can almost see straight away from looking at that where there could be conflict or issues within the relationship.
Mhm.
So just from the basics that we've covered, what do you see, or what would you say looking at that particular chart?
Success.
What would you pull out as being important or significant or potential areas of conflict within those two spiral profiles?
Well, I would say that George is more focused on what we have to do, what we have to get done, in order to get a bigger piece of the pie, in order to add more to his bank account, get a bigger car, keep up with the Joneses.
Yep.
Where Selma may be thinking that those things don't fulfill her as much as what that's fulfilling George, and she may be moving toward maybe some community service, seeing how she can give back, and integrating. Maybe she wants to buy a second home in the country to spend more time in nature.
Yeah, very good, very good. What's the word? Sort of analysis. She's also very family orientated, so the home is important to her. And what is really interesting about the relationship and being able to present something like this in a visual way is that if you're talking to those individuals, you're actually able to give them a different perspective of where they are at, and you provide both individuals with a different view of the relationship and the dynamics and the potentials for conflict. Because as you're quite saying, the conflict could likely come in because George's main focus is on being out there and doing what he can. Okay, and on maintaining the rules, whereas Selma's not that big on structure, on everything being structured. She's a lot more easygoing, but she has enough orange in her profile to actually be able to relate to George, but she's got a lot more green, so and a decent amount of purple in here. So what she would find a lot of joy doing is in creating a home environment that reflects that harmony and her desire for harmony. And it also provides George with a soft place to land. It's somewhere where he can come home, let go of the stresses of the day and all of that driving ambition, and be able to rest and actually perhaps allow Selma to help him to nurture more of the green side. So if this could be presented to people visually almost as a coaching tool, it would be really supportive. As opposed to it just being words, because the visual component really says it all. Selma's also very, very good at integrative thinking. Now, she'd be a bit on the wacky side in respect of the turquoise and the eccentricity, which George would just not understand at all. So she would need to find an outlet or a group of friends that would actually be supportive and of that aspect of her nature. And it's really important then that George allows that to happen. So it's not all about appearances. So the other thing would be, for instance, if Selma as a partner was actually attending a function with George, a work do or whatever, it's kind of like, leave this out of the way.
Mhm.
because he's also got quite a lot of red here. There's a lot of power aspects, and along with this particular attribute of the spiral would come the capacity for shame and being shamed in public, which is a no-no
Mhm.
for anyone with strong red. So it's kind of like, that's fine. You can do that within your own space. Don't bring it into this environment. But understanding that when you see this, it's kind of like, okay, well, I get that. I actually understand it. And she's got enough of an orange, also enough orange there to want to live in a nice place, and to actually have the income and the means to create that supportive environment, to have the gadgets and to actually have the nice things. It's just not as important to her as what it is to George. And there's enough, they're close enough here in respect of these attributes that they would be able to relate on the important values. They could actually harmonize their relationship with that understanding, with a different level of understanding. But far too often, if couples don't have this, it's just, you're just too different to what I am, and I can't get on, and they don't find a way to really be able to accommodate that in a way that is meaningful and supportive for both. Because when we're looking at evolving through the spiral, if Selma's here, then she can understand that she can support George in evolving. She can support him in actually moving through his own spiral, okay, by actually holding this space for him, holding the green space, because that's the next one that's going to develop. The likelihood is if he carries on and carries on here without enough focus on here, he's going to burn out anyway. Okay, so Thelma has enough of a vision and enough of a perspective to be able to almost take the lead in the relationship, and to be able to apply the wisdom to be able to support the harmony. Okay, and to be able to deal with potential conflicts that come up. But it's a very, very, as I say, very valuable tool once you understand what the attributes of each of these levels is, and how we can meet people where they are at. Because the only way that we can evolve the spiral is to speak into the language, the values, and the lens of where people are actually creating their world. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the one thing that's really important here is that George doesn't lose sight of the impact that his drive has on relationships in his immediate and more extended or expanded environment. The ecology, being out in nature, it's really, really good for him to spend time out in nature. It's really good for him to be supported in maintaining the awareness of the impact that his actions have on the multiple levels of relationship that he's engaged with. Yeah. So maybe that is something that we can do for each of us in the group, and have a look at what the profiles are and what our major lenses are, because this is old soul territory up here in the turquoise, but you will have all of these values to some or other degree present. And the thing is that if you are meeting somebody, for instance, and this was one of the things that I experienced and learned in corporate, which was really quite fascinating. And the New Agey environment kind of goes, everything's love and light, love and light, love and light. And it's all, heart, which it is. It's all heart-based approach. But this is very much a heart-centered approach, because it's about recognizing where people are at. Now, I had a woman in my work team, for instance, who had a lot of red in her profile. Okay, a lot of red and a lot of purple. So she was constantly fighting for the underdog. And she made it her mission. And her and I clashed, because my profile was probably more similar to this, but like turquoise is off the charts, a lot of yellow, quite a lot of green, then it comes down. And I also had this like tiny little bit of red and virtually no purple, down at the other end of the scale. So my tendency when something was going on within the team environment where there was a lot of conflict was to go in with a green approach, and to try and restore harmony within the team, and to do it through communication and conflict resolution and all of those. Those are all, a lot of those are the green attributes of going in there. And one day, this woman actually really pushed things a little bit too far. Nothing I did was making any difference whatsoever, and her behavior was getting more and more off the wall. She was really challenging my boundaries big time. And she disappeared without telling me where she was going, without telling the secretary where she was going. She was just doing her own thing. And I got to a point and I went, that's it. Line in the sand, line drawn. Okay. And I waited. I waited until everybody had left the office. And then she was still at work. I went into her office and I closed the door. And I said, right, you tell me right now whether you want to continue working for this team or not. I said, because if you don't want to be here, I'll make it happen. And I laid down the rules that these are the ground rules actually from here on. This is the way that you're going to behave. Your actions are having this and this and this impact on the team, and blah, 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 blah. And I just went off and I laid it down, but it was with a lot of power. And it was like going back at her. But the difference, do you know what was fascinating? The team came in the next morning, the rest of the office, and I had 3 people that came into my office and it says, what's going on with so-and-so? I said, why? They said, she's so different. She actually walked in and she said good morning to us all this morning. And she's really quite pleasant. And I went, oh, isn't that interesting? I said, oh, that's really good. What it was meeting her where she is at. Now, because red is about power, she's going, and like a 2-year-old, they're going to exert power because they're going to test those boundaries, push those boundaries, and it's when you come back and you go, line in the sand, that's it. These are the rules, these are the guidelines, full stop. And don't test me any further than that. Don't push it, because I'll lay down the law. And that's really what I did. And it was almost out of desperation, and I didn't realize what I was doing. But I'd gone in from this level and I'd pulled every little aspect of red as much as I could to go in and meet her where she was at and to deal with that situation. So can you get an idea from this of just how valuable this can be from a perspective of interacting? Because it means that we are the ones as spiral wizards who need to adapt our approach and to be the chameleons who change according to the color of where it is that we are at. We can't expect people to meet us where we are at. We are the ones that have to do that. Okay. And that is power. That is our power. That is our gift. So it says, it's okay to be powerful. It's okay to stand up for yourself. It's okay to impose those boundaries. And when we start looking at holodynes, and the holodynes is like going back down the spiral and going, right, so where within the purple or the red do I actually have potential conflicts or issues that are arising? And then we go into those specific holodynes and adjust and clear that lens. Can you see where I've been going with this, where I could see that this is going to provide us with focus? Yes, Rachel.
Can I just ask a question? It's interesting because I think when we're at a place where other people don't get us, they don't understand what we're saying, and we can't seem to meet them. You know, they can't see where we're coming from at all.
Yeah.
And in the past, it's almost been like we have to lower our vibration in order to meet them.
Yes.
And that's always been very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like I can't go there anymore because my vibration's gone up,
Yeah.
and I can't go physically, and everything can't go back down that way. So it's interesting here now, because that's sort of saying we can still meet them from an aspect of ourself without having to let go of our, reduce our vibration, if you like.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Thank you for bringing that up, because that is what it is. So it's not about isolating ourselves or ourselves from the world or from other people. It really is about being able to hold our core and move in and out of wherever we are at on the spiral, or wherever that individual is on the spiral, wherever we need to be. We just don the cloak, but it doesn't disrupt our core.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. So I think there's a lot of healing that perhaps needs to take place within us in order for us to do that. Because there's also this perhaps a distorted belief in some way, shape, or form that we need to be able to isolate ourselves from others, be with people of like mind, so that we don't drop our vibration. That is not what the world needs.
No.
The world needs us to be in the world, but not of it. So we need to be in the world, in that, sort of orange or in that red, but not of it. So that's not dropping our vibration into that level. It's just being able to harness those qualities within ourselves to project into that space.
And what's really good in a way is that when we've sort of, like for me personally, taken a step back and had that time away from being in the world, and doing this sort of work, do you want to call it that, is to gain that understanding that we can hold our core stable be out there, because in order to I suppose, if you like, let our frequency, not affect people. Do you know what I mean? Allow our frequency to circulate and give other people the opportunity then to share that energy and maybe access that vibration themselves through us being the anchor.
Yeah.
Then that way we can go out and still be stable, whereas in the past it's felt like if I go out I'm too affected by everybody. But it is a case of, I mean, I can feel it for myself. Last year was a huge shift for me, and where I'm at now is okay, I'm not out in the world that often, but I'm feeling that I'm ready to be seen. So it is a case of now I'm prepared, I've been preparing to be able to go out there and do that, because I have the understanding that it isn't an unsafe place as it has seemed in the past, that it's now whatever vibration I'm bringing is what I will meet in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Any questions at the moment in respect of this? Any other sort of comments, observations? No? Okay. So what I've done is I've actually just sketched on the next slide the top level attributes of the first two layers of the spiral, which is the purple and the red. So we're only, because it's too much to go through all of it at once. This is going to take time to build up so that we can have a look at those fundamental attributes of our lives, if you like. So the purple level, if you like, somebody who is focused through the purple lens, is what we might term the traditionalist. So the values and the consciousness that is very prevalent at this level is that there is a strong group identity. One of the expressions that is very applicable to this level is one for all and all for one. Okay. Sometimes that is actually applied at a higher level. People think that that's a green value, or it's very much a purple one. Decisions that are taken by somebody who is very strong in this particular strata, decisions are taken by the group. So very little room for individual expression, because all major decisions that impact or influence us are taken by the group. So ritual and tradition are very important. So you can see this with a lot of tribal groups. It's about respecting the elders and maintaining the status quo. There is, we will fight for our beliefs. And the whole team, the whole clan, the whole family will gather to defend itself if their beliefs are challenged. Okay. Generally, individuals here would generally seek approval, and they seek approval from their family, from their clan, from their tribe, from their community. Structure and direction are needed, and there is guidance by clear rules. These are not the rules that we speak about when we're talking about the blue level of the community level of the spiral. This is really about the clear rules in respect of roles. So each person within the group has very specific role functions. So you see this within certain cultures where the woman has a certain function, the male has a certain function, the kids are expected to behave in a certain way, but clear role functions. There is an elder in the community, there is a sage, there is a wisdom keeper and a medicine person. There are very, very clear roles within the group. And you don't deviate from those. If that is your role, that is your role. Okay. The benefit of this, if you think about it from the perspective of a single lifetime, that we also move through these layers and levels within a single lifetime, is that if we don't have a strong family support system, and a strong family dynamic that has provided that nurturing, this is a very nurturing environment, that has provided that nurturance and the safety of that container at a very early age, then that means that there is damage or fracturing at the purple level of our own inner spiral. So this really is effective and applicable from the ages of naught, birth and pre-birth, birth to around about 2 years. 2 years is when the red would actually kick in. So where we are looking in our own life, within the purple, sort of where we have resistances to traditions, to family values, or where we may want to overplay those traditions, where we perhaps get too stuck. So it's wherever there may be an extreme. Do we respect ritual and tradition, or do we actually, I mean, me, I'm a again, you know, this is where the renegade me came in, where I actually dismissed this completely, you know, because it was just so small in my profile. However, what I've had to sort of go back on that, because it was when the ancestors and the ancestral work started coming in a number of years ago that I really started to value this attribute of the spiral. But I also understood that where I came from was from a fractured home environment where there was so much stress that already existed that the role clarity wasn't clear. My father was an alcoholic. It was not a stable environment. Now, how many people have a stable home environment in respect of those early formative years? So it is really, really important during the early formative years to have very, very strong traditionalist values in play. And rituals and traditions extend to children having proper routines, establishing this is bedtime and you brush your teeth before bed and you do this and you kiss your mom goodnight and sort of those routines that they have help to provide that container of safety for their early development. So this is vital for evolution within a single lifetime. So when we go through the awakening, very often we have to go back and heal the holodynes that actually exist within this level.
Mm-hmm.
So what stresses individuals who have very, very strong purple in their profile is happenings that are not understood. So anything that takes place outside of this closed, nurturing, safe little group is to be feared. There is a lot of fear. There's a lot of nurturance, but there is a lot of fear of anything outside of the group. And this is where you kind of get some of the, you cannot intermarry between different clans or cultures, where you've got to maintain the bloodline. There's a fear of tainting. That's all purple stuff. What stresses these individuals is lack of structure or role definition, fear of making mistakes, and rapid change. So if you put an individual who is very, very strong in purple into an environment where they are faced or having to deal with a lot of rapid change, it's setting that individual up for failure.
Mm.
Because purple individuals are not good in roles like that.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I mean also by saying we got to meet people where they're at. So individuals here need to work in positions or roles that actually are very, very clearly defined. So they need that clarity of definition. They need the safety and support of others within a network. Okay, it's very difficult, depending on what else is in their profile, but very difficult for them to operate on their own. They function better as a team. And don't ask them to put them in a position where they've got to make decisions, because there'll be a real fear of making mistakes. They'll always want to defer to somebody above or somebody older. So when we look at some of those attributes within ourselves in respect of being fearful of being visible, fearful of going out on our own, it's like, take a look. And you might even want to visualize that as a frequency band within you, sort of within the purple frequency. Surround yourself in purple and seek out the holodynes that actually correlate with that particular level within. Does that make sense? Yeah. This is actually starting to get fun, because I think there's going to be a lot of stuff starting to be uncovered, I think, within this that we perhaps hadn't recognized or realized. But it gives us a structure.
It's really brilliant. I love it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I am so sorry. I have to get off it too.
Don't worry, I have to go too. So we're not going to be able to do the breakout rooms this evening. We're going to, after all of that, Mariah, and thank you so much for setting it up, we're going to have to make a plan, I think, to meet up individually, either on Skype and do one-to-one pairings over the next 2 weeks, because the objective now is you've got the holodyne script, you've got this overview, is to go into these two value systems, the purple and the red, work with partners and actually work with that holodyne script and see what unfolds.
I think that makes a lot of sense, actually, to be able to, I can see now, I can see there's so many aspects of myself, not necessarily now, but that I've been challenged with from the purple. That makes it's a good structure for me, actually, to be able to say, rather than just go in and say, right, show me, now I've got a clearer focus on what it is that I've been challenged with, if you like, and now I can go more and look at that.
then write that down. Write
Yeah.
down anything
Yeah.
that you are aware of within that level, that layer, so that you
Yeah.
can use it as a focus when you go into work with the holograms
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
holodynes. Very powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, so just very quickly then, it's like a couple of minutes. Let's have a look at the red individual, or the red system, the red level of consciousness, classed as the lone leader. It is the individual who breaks out of the structure of the confines of that almost stifling, nurturing tribal group that kind of says, no, you know, it's like pushing the boundaries. I need something more than this. And we begin to test and discover our own power. So the red individual, essentially, these are individuals who will always, excuse me, question the status quo. Okay, so those that are going to challenge the status quo all the time. Why, what, wherefore? Terrible twos. Think about it from a physical perspective. What do the 2-year-olds do? They challenge you all the time. They're just learning to talk, ask questions, reason. Okay, and they're going to push you. Also, very, very expressive in sports. So there's a high creative energy contained here. As well as physical energy for sport, music, and the arts. So somebody who is strong in red, if they don't channel the energy properly, that's when it begins to cause trouble. This can be so incredibly fueled into individual sports, marathon running, sprinting, not necessarily team sports here, but individual sports that challenge an individual's own ability to push his own boundaries. So weightlifting, all of those individually orientated activities, tests the worthiness of others. Whether you're 2 years old or 30 years old, you're going to test the other person's worthiness to be deserving of your respect. Whereas purple says, you actually deserve respect. Excuse me. Purple says you deserve respect purely by virtue of being an elder or an ancestor. Red actually goes in and says, no, I'm going to challenge you. You have to earn respect. So anybody who challenges that aspect of respect is coming from a high degree of red. Seeks attention and demands respect. So those that are always in the middle, the loud ones, the not necessarily just loud, but those who are busy showing off, boasting about their skills and demanding others' respect. And this is where you get the authoritarianism and those despot leaders who demand the respect of others by laying down the rules, power over. And they do what they do to get attention, basically. A lot of red. They want immediate rewards. That's one thing about this. Think about the terrible twos again. Instant gratification. I want it and I want it now. Don't ask me to wait. I want it now. Okay? And enjoys immediate recognition. It's another aspect of the gratification, whether that's emotional or physical. It's looking for that immediate. So you can almost see a lot of that also playing out in society where there's this desire for instant gratification. It's almost like, and very interesting, because there have been some psychological articles written about the way that archetypal advertising has been used to infantilize adults. It's almost like taking them back to being children, to this level, and wanting instant gratification. And these are the colors, these are the languages, the subliminal messages that are being used in advertising. And it's like Black Friday. You know, if you don't get it now, you gotta have it, you gotta have it now, kind of thing. And what do? You see everybody scrambling over one another, not respecting anybody, you know, and screaming at each other in the face. It is such red behavior. It's like holding a red card up. Here you go, doors open, go. So you can kind of see how advertising is being used to almost drop people back to that level of behavior. And if people could actually only understand, I think a lot of the time, what is happening, that they have been programmed into that, then we'd begin to see the evolution out. And if we could also manage to get corporates to be a lot more responsible about the way that they're actually using language and behavior. Once we're aware of it, once you have the knowledge and the awareness, you develop a high degree of immunity to it. Okay. So what stresses Red is that any challenge or threat to their personal power, restrictions to their personal freedom, shame, or loss of faith. Now, as a 2-year-old, whatever, 2 to sort of 4 years old, within that time, if you were ever shamed by your parents in public, and let's face it, our parents had no qualms about giving us, certain parents, about like giving us a good hiding, whether it was in public or not. So there's likely going to be some of those traumas hiding within this particular this particular layer of the spiral. Restrictions to personal freedom. No, you cannot do that. Rather than being able to communicate with the child in such a way that the boundaries are actually set, but there is a respect that is actually afforded him as part of that development. So if you've been disrespected in any way as an individual and diminished just because we were children, you know, as a child, that would have impacted the strength of this layer. You with me?
Yeah.
So yeah, shame, loss of faith, challenges or threats. Yeah, anything also, you know, there are also instances as well where, like for instance, parents going off, mother going into hospital, nothing is said to the children. So it's like disrespecting the fact that the child actually has an emotional connection to the parent, and you know, there's no need to actually explain it to the child. So the mother disappears for a week because she's in hospital and nothing is actually said. That's actually a threat. That's perceived as a threat to the child, and it's like their entire infrastructure has actually been broken down. So between the purple and the red, there's a huge breakdown in their sense of themselves, a disrespect for who they are as growing individuals. Can you guys think of any others that you might actually see in there?
I'm going to have to pop off. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine, Bunny. Thank you.
Bye, Bonnie.
Have a good day.
I noticed reading through those, at first I looked and I thought with the red that none of that applied to me, but I think even from being very young I questioned the status quo, but I wouldn't do it outwardly. It was always that I would do it inwardly, because if you did it outwardly you might be criticized, or you know, and it goes back to that thing about viewing the world differently and then being told no, you're wrong.
Yes, and that's a challenge to your power.
Yeah, yeah.
To your personal power. Yeah.
But the other aspects, I don't recognize myself in that so much.
Yeah.
That, you know, it almost like the testing or seeking attention. I think, or for me, I would always pull away. I see myself more in the purple. But on saying that, the stress factors are challenging. You know, challenge to your personal power, restrictions. I can completely identify with that, but not with the actual, you know.
You see, what's interesting is that if you were not allowed to actually express any of your personal power, where that was squashed before you even had the opportunity to taste it, then that would have been a weakness. That would have resulted in weaker development of that level of the spiral. And hence, when we get older, there's a reluctance to step into that space. And I can see this in me, because the red is so, also for me, so poorly developed because I was not allowed to challenge at
No.
all.
No.
It was that you do not even open your mouth. And
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and constant comparison. So there was a lack
Yeah.
of worth, a lack of value. There was almost a complete disregard, a complete disrespect for anything that I was as an individual. So those early formative years, and of course, and I was two when I hit the terrible twos was when my sister was born.
Yeah. Same here.
So so it's almost like I was co-opted into the purple role and had to stay in that role
Yeah.
and was never allowed to develop my own individuality.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to me. And I wondered, you know, whether or not, obviously, because we choose our parents,
Yeah.
whether or not as an old soul that those aspects, you know, for us now to be able to work through those, to be able to at this time step into our leadership is what's been important. And even though we were sort of suppressed in a way, was that because we were being protected from being into our leadership too soon and being noticed too soon?
Quite possibly. That's, quite everything actually happens in accordance with that divine timing and divine plan. So yes, absolutely. You know, it's kind of like our wake up is almost like ordained and timed to be at a specific time.
Yeah.
And the healing and the resolution and the understanding that actually flows as a consequence of that is in perfect timing.
Yeah. So in a way, what I'm saying is that we can look at those aspects, because I know for myself, for a long time I was the victim. I was you know, I was what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, like a victim to it. You know, I was not strong. I was this, that, and the other. But when I look back now, I don't actually feel that that anything actually happened to me. I feel almost like that was either a memory rather than actually went through it. You know, like almost like that was put in the program, but did I actually exist in that time? Do you know what I mean? But then, like as we can all see, there are aspects of those that how can I describe? I'm trying to think of a way to describe it better, but it's almost like they're little things that trip you up still.
Yes. Yeah, and they are. And also, something as you were talking, Rachel, that was also coming to me is bear in mind that there are many levels of also viewing this. So we can look at this now from the perspective of this lifetime and healing those holograms.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, in other lifetimes, we have been held up, shot, taken out of the picture, have damaged so many people because we actually overexerted this red attribute. We challenged the status quo and what it was. We stood up, put our heads above the parapet, went in there gung-ho and were taken out because of it. And I know, for instance, that I've seen, you know, I've had visions of my own experiences where that power has been absolutely misused to the detriment of huge numbers of people.
Yeah.
So there is a real fear of expressing that. So we were actually born into the family, which also enabled us and held that back until such time as we had the wisdom to be able to step into that power in a more responsible way.
So when we're working with the holodynes, then I'm just trying to think now how to word it. So if we're working with the holodynes, we're actually looking for not just what's happened in this life, but we're also looking for the trace elements that, like you say, that take us right back to the result, you know, the solution. They're taking us back to the solution rather than, you know, looking at the problem. So when we're working then with the holodynes, it's we're not just then looking at this life, are we? You know, we need to.
No. And,
Yeah.
and in fact, what might be interesting to work with is you've got the script.
Yeah.
Some of the issues are very evident just from looking at this, but there's even much more to it because this is a top level summary that I've given you.
Yeah.
So work first with the ones that you are consciously aware of. But then you're going to go to another level within these particular bands of consciousness, and you're going to ask to be connected with any of the immature holodynes that are still present or represented, associated with this layer or level of consciousness. And that way it will connect you, you know, sort of whether that be past life, this lifetime, whatever it is that needs to be brought up into awareness. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had a little bit of that experience this last week, clearing relationships, and it'd be interesting to go back. I took some detailed notes because it was coming to me minute by minute with this holodyne communication, and some of it was very clearly old soul, past life.
Yeah.
Stuff in 2 or 3 instances, and the holodyne, the message came into 5 or 6 areas of my body.
Wow.
And I thought, what, what is all of this? So it'll be interesting to be able to go back to this now and kind of pull out the other details that are still there.
What's interesting, Mariah, is that what we would probably find is that if there is something that is particular, the sort of the immature holodyne that is the root contributor to an issue that, say, sits within red, is that would cast out threads through the other layers of the spiral and into the other consciousness levels.
That's exactly what it was like. It was like a big root system.
Yes.
And there were these little clumps, and I thought, what, where is all of this? It was like, that's exactly what it was like.
Okay. Right. So you guys, I think if we can kind of wrap this up here. There's some good focus to be able to move forward between now and the next time that we meet. And I think the next time, if we can do this, if we allow 2 weeks, it gives us enough time to meet up with the others, to select partners to work with one another, organize partners. And should I leave you guys to approach, or do you want me to allocate?
I think Bonnie already asked me if I would partner up with her, because I was going to try and meet with her
brilliant.
last week. But
yeah, okay, that's super. Mariah?
Yeah, Natalie and I were talking, and I thought, Rachel too, might be a possibility just because we've been meeting.
Yeah.
And I thought it might be fun.
Okay, we can do that, yeah.
And I'm also open to connect with Robin. I'll pair up and do more if that's.
Bless you. That's absolutely wonderful. Yeah. And I will also, I'd love to do some one-to-one work. So I'll just check with you guys and see if it depends on my schedule as well, and how that actually matches up with everybody else's schedule, and the fact that I'm sort of preparing the material. But it would be really, really good to work in partners for this next stage as we start deepening the lenses. And I'm going to go more deeply into these as we actually move along. So to each of the value systems.
So this structure then will give us the grid colors, for the values. We're constructing then the visual map for for ourselves.
Yes.
Really what we're doing
Yes.
at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it's the overview, and we're going to narrow it down so that we actually begin to clear
Mhm.
and expand, and then be able to create, because as we clear, we're actually freeing up energy so that we can begin to create as a community from a more effective foundation.
Yeah.
For all of us. So I think it's just a very worthwhile stage of the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it'll be very valuable. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're meeting
Okay.
on the 3rd, Sunday the 3rd of December.
Yeah, that's 2 days before I fly out, so I think that's a perfect day.
Yep, okay.
So if that's okay. So yeah, as soon as it's ready, Mariah, if you wouldn't mind just sending me the link to the recording, so that I can get it out to, I don't know. Jennifer's just sent a note. Unfortunately, I don't think she's going to be able to continue because she's
she's
got
meeting with the
commitments
group.
with clients. Yeah. So I think the best thing at the moment is to, and we know Robin is also going to struggle to continue because her circumstances have changed.
Do you need to still be recording this, by the way?
Oh, no.
Oh,
No,
okay.
no,
Thank
we
you.
can stop recording. Thank you. Until next time. So we're going to work with the Holodyne script and the immature Holodynes within these 2 levels of consciousness, both current life and any immature Holodynes from past lives too.